In this seminar, I'd like to talk a bit of a study with colleagues Jane Davis and Emily that is looking at firm-level capabilities that can support the successful implementation of service-based business models in manufacturing companies. And why did we get interested in the issue of capability? When looking at the literature, we realized that the issue of capability started to be discussed in the literature on integrated solutions. Andy Davis in 2004 looked at the cases of 5 international suppliers and identified 4 key capabilities for the successful offering of integrated solutions. This classification has been further studied by Cicin Friendship and Cicin Masini from a contingency perspective, and these authors have noticed that different environmental conditions in different organizational settings require different optimal configurations of capabilities. But actually, the concept of capabilities used in this early literature is very much focused on the context of the market offering. Basically, capability is intended as the ability to offer specific services like consultancy services or financial services, which is actually not the key. The key content of the concept of capability is not actually abilities and skills. And in fact, in their very much cited editorial on industrial marketing management in 2007, Kova and Sal have highlighted that the capabilities for services also include other skills, including risk management, information analysis, information management. This view of capability has been actually implemented by Storbaka that have identified the key commercialization, industrialization, and platform capability for each step of the process from designing to delivering a solution. And later, there's the work by Paiola and colleagues that have focused on the trade-off between internal and external development of capabilities for services, and looking at the type of development and the key element in the offering have identified 4 key strategic options for the delivery of integrated solutions. If we look at the broader literature on servitization, we notice that the issue of capabilities have been touched upon by the many studies that have discussed the challenges of servitization. And this kind of work has been somehow summarized by Radatz and his colleagues in a study which is forthcoming, which is actually just published in JSM. There's also the work of Spring and Araujo, who have focused on the conceptualization of service-related capabilities. But if we look at studies that have explicitly classified and identified the capabilities for services, there are only 3 studies, 3 examples: Kinstrom in 2010, Ulaga and Reinhardt in 2011, and more recently Farid and colleagues, who have also highlighted that business partners are actually a key element in putting together the key capabilities to offer services. So looking at this literature, we identified some key gaps. So first of all, there's no unanimity regarding the key capabilities for servitization. Different authors have proposed different things. There's no empirical evidence at all on how companies orchestrate and configure service-relevant capabilities in practice, and all the existing studies have focused on services in the aggregate, so they do not consider that companies can offer very different services, and different services require different types of capabilities. And finally, existing studies, except for the work by Radatz and colleagues, have not linked capabilities to service and company performance. So we decided to design a study that could try to address these main gaps. So what we did is that we used the capability audit tool that was developed within the Cambridge Service Alliance through case studies of leading companies in service-based business models. The main reasoning behind this tool is that when companies shift towards a service-focused business models, they have to innovate their value proposition. Typically, they have to commit to deliver outcomes to the customer. And they have to do so in the context of an emerging ecosystem that they increasingly need to understand and track. In order to innovate their value proposition, they also have to innovate their value delivery system, because they often have to partner with other companies, so to have shared capabilities with their business partner. And the new value proposition and new value delivery system imply greater risk for the need for the company to commit for outcome and less control, because companies have to rely on business partners. So therefore, also greater accountability spread. For this reason, the capability audit tool identifies 4 key categories of capabilities. Within these categories, 12 bundles of capabilities that include 36 individual capabilities. So this is an overview of the overall framework. And how did we apply this framework in our study? Given that capabilities assume different features in different industries, we decided to focus on a single industry. And we chose aerospace and defense because this was a sector that we were familiar with, and also a sector in which the transition to services have been particularly important. So we've studied the 138 companies listed in Standard & Poor's Capital IQ database, with aerospace and defense as primary industry, companies that are publicly listed, and with more than 100 employees. We examined the 10K or annual report narratives of these companies in order to identify the capability tool capabilities possessed by these companies. Many people think that annual reports and 10Ks only include financial data, so they wouldn't be a good source of information for capabilities. But actually, annual reports also include narratives in which the companies describe their business priorities, their capabilities, and the importance, the things that are really important to them. And these documents are actually extensively used by analysts. So any reference to service-relevant capabilities in annual reports, narratives, can be considered to be important to the company. Clearly, using this data source, we cannot really capture the capability, the entire capabilities possessed by the companies, but the capabilities that the companies emphasize. So the capabilities that they actually are aware of and they really used in their business strategies. So the problem with the annual report narratives is actually that the information in these documents is often unstructured, and it's very difficult and time-consuming to extract. So we use the content analysis methodology and WordStat 7, which is a content analysis software. This technique, content analysis, has been used in field of management and on the analysis of company documents since the 80s, and recently it's been used to study different things, even if it has been rarely, so far, it has been rarely used to the study of services. So what we did is that we first of all created a database where we collected all the 10Ks and annual reports. We took the 10K if this was available, otherwise we took the annual report, and we focused on the last available documents, so 2013 or 2014, depending on the fiscal year adopted by the company. We got all these documents from the various databases that we have access to at Cambridge, so Capital IQ, SEC website. We also looked at the company website. We contacted directly the companies for which we couldn't find the annual report, and at this stage we had to exclude 39 companies from the sample because they simply were not reachable. They didn't have an English version of the annual report. After this, next step was to create the so-called dictionary for the content analysis. So we basically identified some key terms that could allow us to capture our capability audit capabilities. And we identified different terminology, alternative terminology. For example, the companies could talk of partnership, agreements, arrangements, consortium, contract, joint venture, in order to mention initiatives that where they were collaborating with other companies, for example. And we also identified alternative spelling, typically difference between US and UK spelling. We defined the rules based on the closeness of key terms within documents in order to get more accurate hits. So, for example, we asked to the software to show us where, for example, the words value and customer could be found in the same sentence, or, for example, distance of no more than 5 words, and so on. So in this way, we identify 96 rules, including over 800 key search terms, and we are now we have then examined manually all these hits in order to exclude all the irrelevant uses, duplicates, negative connotations, and also sentences that were simply forward-looking statements, so not relevant to our investigation. So here are some examples of sentences from the annual report that were representative of the capabilities that we were searching, so some of our hits. And the next step for us was to identify also the service offering of the companies. And we used again the content analysis, but this time what we content analyzed were the long business descriptions of the companies in the Capital IQ database. So we considered 15 types of services that aerospace and defense companies typically can offer. So also in this case, we created a dictionary with the key search terms representing the 15 service categories. And when we run this search, so when we content analyze the long business description, seeking for evidence of the different services offered by each company, we identified that we had 9 companies that were non-servitized, so poor manufacturing companies, and other companies that were poor service companies. And after we excluded those companies from the sample, our final sample was consisted of 83 servitized companies. We actually haven't completed the coding of the service relevant capabilities. At the moment, we have coded capabilities in the 2 categories of value delivery and accountability spread in capabilities, so 2 categories and 36 individual capabilities. The first thing that we try to examine, that we looked at, is whether different service offerings were associated to different levels of capabilities. So we divided the companies in 3 groups based on the number of services that they offered. In group 1, we collected all the companies that offered less than 4 services. In group 2, the companies that offered from 4 to 6 services, and in group 3, all the companies that offered less than 3 services. Then we also considered the breadth of the capabilities, so the number of different capabilities possessed by these companies, and we used the one-way ANOVA to examine this situation, and our results indicate that there's a significant difference in the breadth of capabilities between the companies in the 3 groups. So different services seem to be associated to different breadth of capabilities possessed by the companies. But we actually wanted to understand where the difference in capabilities was exactly located across the three groups. So we conducted a post-hoc comparison, so the Bonferroni test reported here, that shows that actually the difference in capabilities is not significant between companies in group 1 and group 2, but only between companies in group 1 and 3 and 2 and 3. So basically, companies show more capabilities only when they offer more than 6 services. And we thought that a possible reason for this evidence could be that up to when they offer our 6 services, the companies basically offer product-related services. So they can do so essentially using their product-related capabilities. When they start expanding their service offering further, they offer less product-related services, and it is at that stage, it is at that moment that they require a broader set of capabilities to support their shift. In order to examine this potential explanation, we identified what services in our list could be product unrelated, and we actually examined if there was a significant difference in the level of these services between the companies in group 1, 2 and 3. Again, we used the one-way ANOVA, and the result outlined here, so less than 0.05, shows that there was a statistically significant difference in the level of product unrelated services across the 3 groups. Again, we performed a post-hoc analysis, and the Bonferroni test shows what we expected, that actually the number of product unrelated services is significantly greater for companies in group 3, so offering more than 6 services, than for companies in groups 1 and 2. After this initial analysis, we conducted exploratory factor analysis with the principal component factoring and varimasks rotation to further examine the underlying structure behind our service relevant capabilities. And based on agent values greater than 1, so the Gutmann-Kaiser rules and the examination of the scree plot, we found out that our capabilities loaded into 6 factors that could represent 62.11% of the variance in the data set. Actually, in doing this analysis that I will discuss in a minute, we had some issues related to the sample size. Actually, with 18 variables, our 18 capabilities, and 83 observation, we almost met the requirement of 5 observation per variable. But actually, considering that ideally there should be even 20 observation for variable, we performed the KMO test in order to assess whether factor analysis could be an approach that we could use to examine the structure of our capability. And the statistic that we got greater than 0.5 show that actually our variables have enough in common to warrant this factor analysis. So we went on with the factor analysis, and we found it out that 12 of our capabilities loaded into our six factors. Basically, 61% of the variability in the data set could be explained by 12 of the 18 capabilities grouped into our 6 factors. But what is really relevant here is not really the factor loadings or other statistics that really we checked, but the phase validity, so how our capabilities were grouped by the factor analysis. So factor 1 included the capabilities of risk measurement and risk mitigation, as well as strength of organizational culture. So we labeled these factors factor risk-bearing, as we thought that actually this factor here represented the ability of the companies to actually measure the risks that they were going through when offering services and adopt measure practices in order to mitigate this risk. Clearly, this from our analysis, it looks like this needs to be supported by a strong organizational culture. Our second factor included the capabilities of risk allocation and risk pricing. So we call this factor risk transfer. So basically, the companies have to share the risk with their partners, so identify clearly responsible for risk, and also price the risk when they have to take them on board. Our third factor instead included the capabilities of presence of internal incentives and understanding of long-term risk. We labeled it long-term prospect because basically we thought that this factor represented the need for the companies to understand the long-term risk and support addressing this risk through internal incentive. Our fourth factor included two capabilities: development of internal capabilities and understanding of performance risk. So basically, when the companies understand the performance risk that they have to face when offering services, they develop internal capabilities in order to be able to face this risk. So we call this internal resource priority because these capabilities were actually focused on the capabilities that the companies need to have internally. Our fifth factor was labeled collaboration with business partner, so capabilities to partner with other companies and to actually have some government mechanism in place in these networks with business partners. Our sixth factor was labeled ecosystem support. It only included one capability, which was a contribution of ecosystem partner. So we were quite happy actually with this factor analysis because we noted that the logical the grouping that came out from the statistical analysis had some face validity, so it looked logical, and also it covered different aspects from the ecosystem to the ability to understand, manage the risk. So different of the aspects that were included in the original capability framework were actually confirmed by the empirical and statistical analysis. Clearly, these results are preliminary. So what we need to do now is clearly to complete the coding of the capabilities, but also to build and implement a regression model that looks at the interaction between level of services and level of capabilities and their impact on company performance. We're not sure whether this will be a mediation analysis, so basically if we will assess that the presence of capabilities will actually affect the impact of services of company performance, or if it will be a moderation analysis. So services affect capabilities, capabilities affect performance. But we know that this investigation will have to also consider other variables in addition to the key ones. For example, we will have to control for the size of the company. We will have to control for the positioning of the company in the supply chain. So we expect that there will be a difference between first-tier suppliers and other suppliers, and for the type of customer, so companies that basically have the government as customer, or companies that have other industrial companies as main customers. Probably actually we will have to split the model into different models that will study the interaction between level of different services and level of different capabilities, because as I've mentioned at the beginning, we expect to see that actually different services require different capabilities. So in order to conclude, with this study we found evidence of the link between level of servitization in terms of number of services and firm level value delivery and accountability spread capabilities. However, we didn't see any link until the companies offered less than 7 services. And one possible explanation is that small service offerings are dominated by product-related services. We've been able to condense the underlying structure of our capabilities into 6 latent factors, and the logical grouping of the characteristics loading in the factors actually shows the face validity of our factor analysis. In terms of future work, as I mentioned already, we have to complete the coding of the capabilities. We have actually also to validate this coding, because we have 2 coders, myself and Jane, who are coding in parallel. So we will have to calculate that to assess that our coding is consistent through some measure of intercoder reliability. We want to discuss our coding with some of the sample companies to see if actually our coding has face validity. And we also have to check whether we introduce some bias by using 2 different types of documents, so 10Ks and annual reports. We have to define appropriate constructs for our control variables, so supply chain position, type of customers, and other potential control. And we also have to basically refine the regression model by formulate specific hypotheses that we will be testing through our regression model. But I think this is where we are at the moment. So thank you for your attention.